All right. April 8th of April. I nailed it. We're going live. Nick, welcome back. Second week for the Moonshot Dispatch, covering the big issues actually since we last spoke. Everything's blown up.
Yep. Yeah, we were sort of nervous trepidation. Things are looking okay, and now
the Trump tariffs is the big theme.
Yeah.
Global volatility is back, and crypto is feeling it. Where are we at?
Yeah, I think it's pretty telling actually. Hearing a lot around the traps of the tariff, the trade war that's happening. Everyone's talking about what's it going to mean. Prices are diving. Bitcoin looks good for a little bit. Everyone's like, oh, maybe it's decoupled here. And then yesterday happened, and we just lost so much gains. I think what was interesting for me was how yesterday Trump slapped on this extra 50% to China. So China were like, you're going to give us 35%, we're going to give you 34% or something. And then Trump's like, well, you're giving us another 34, we're going to do another 50. And just like it became this sort of brinksmanship kind of like fight. And when that extra 50 came on, which would technically put China selling stuff into the US at over 100% for some of the goods, which is just wild. No one really seemed to care. I think everyone had just, the market had already been bleeding for so long. There was just blood in the streets. And everyone was just like, okay, enough's enough. We've got nothing left to sell. So I thought that was quite interesting.
It's pretty fascinating to see Trump run the largest economy in the world just by shooting from the hip. Like he's just running and gunning.
Yeah, and the traditional finance, I mean, everyone hates it, right? Like especially traditional finance, people who are in, these actual, firms that are supposed to try and predict the future and what's happening. How do you do it in this kind of market? You can't. It's impossible. And so a lot of people, I think, are just sitting there going, well, we've got to just take a step back here. Yeah. You can't make any decisions at the moment because you just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And when China's sort of getting involved as well, like, they've been very quiet when Trump's coming. I feel like everyone's kind of just watching what Trump's doing, and he's very loud and likes to make these big sweeping decisions. And now China's going, you know what, we can come back and do the same thing, and it's just too much.
The US volatility is certainly back. It seems, but I mean, you can't throw a tariff on Bitcoin, which is a great thing, right?
Well, they could try. They could certainly try. You could start taxing it in some way, I suppose. But yeah, I mean. That's the next thing, right? Everyone's looking, okay, so is Bitcoin the new digital gold? Mm-hmm. Everyone's wanted it to be that way for such a long time now. Scott Bessent has come out talking about that, which is interesting. So he's like the crypto czar. Is it crypto czar?
The crypto czar.
Yeah, and he's been vocal on that kind of stuff very recently, talking about it. Larry Fink has been talking about similar stuff. There was an interesting. I just wanted to pull it up here. Larry Fink sent a message to the shareholders, and it was, you can read it as bullish, but it's sort of a negative message. So he says, decentralized finance is an extraordinary innovation. It makes markets faster, cheaper, and more transparent. Yet that same innovation could undermine America's economic advantage if investors begin seeing Bitcoin as a safer bet than the dollar. And so reading
big words.
Yeah, if you just listen to that up front, you're like, okay, so he's saying Bitcoin's a threat. But what he's probably really saying is Bitcoin is your safe haven because the US dollar is under threat whether you like it or not. And this is, that's somewhere where you can flee to. Anyway, that's how I like to read it.
Yeah, right. To the extent that you're sort of familiar with it, I guess, how does this impact sort of credit markets, which ultimately drive, I guess, equities and crypto markets probably as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have an effect everywhere, right? Everyone, as I said before, everyone's kind of waiting and seeing. China is now selling the treasuries, the US treasuries, which is the opposite of what the US want. They want everyone to buy their treasuries, and and so this comes back to something we said last week about stable coins, where the US is like, okay, we're doing this crazy thing. People are going to be unsure about how it's going to come out in the market. Let's at least get some framework in there for stable coins and make sure that the US dollar stays as the reserve for as long as possible. It's just a wait and see at the moment.
Yeah, I said credit markets. I guess I'm specifically referring to, say, bond markets and the like. The conspiracy theorists are out there talking about this is a chance for Trump, in his grand plan to kind of refinance at lower rates.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I mean, even apparently Trump retweeted something about that, right? Where someone suggested, oh, he's crashing the markets on purpose, so the refinancing is cheaper when it comes to that point, which is soon. I think it's in a few weeks. And yeah, like all the guys who are, I don't want to say Trump is not serious, but all the serious TradFi guys are like, no, this is not. We're not crushing the markets. Like that's not what we're trying to do here. So then Trump goes and retweets something that sort of plays out this scenario.
Yeah, just shooting from the hip. Yeah,
just shooting from the hip. You don't know what he's going to do next. Yeah.
Make the penguins pay the tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I guess so. It's very easy to go backwards and kind of try to ascribe some kind of methodology to this craziness, but like maybe who knows, right? Because this whole tariff thing is like classic sort of Trump kind of negotiating power, where he kind of goes, well, look, to be honest, like these tariffs are going to hurt smaller economies more than us, and it kind of forces them to the table to say, all right, you need to negotiate.
Yeah. So the other countries have been scrambling to negotiate because it's desperation times. As far as I can see, Australia is kind of trying to, puff out their chest a bit, and obviously we've got the lowest tariffs. We're on the 10% tier, which is the best you can hope for. But yeah, I know like Israel's sort of right at the top there. I can't remember there's another country that's like right at the top trying to negotiate. But then this is the other thing. Half the time, like you're getting all these mixed messages from the administration, where some of them are saying, like we'll look at the request for negotiation on a case-by-case basis, but then some other people are saying, no, we're not negotiating at all. This is like locked in and ready to go. And then Trump is throwing these weird kind of weasel words around that you don't quite know what he means. And so you just don't know whether it's possible to even come back from this as a country, or if this is it now. And Trump has been talking about tariffs since the 80s, I think. Like this has been his sort of thing.
It's
where
really it's been his jag for a long time.
We need more tariffs because it's just unfair. America's getting crushed. And now he did tariffs in the first his first stint as the president. But there was a whole lot of there was real room for negotiation to move there. Like Australia got tariffed, and then we managed to talk our way out of it. So it was. It's just like at the moment it seems much more like he's going much harder than he did in the first one. I remember back in the 8 years ago, whenever it was when he first did the first lot. There was talk about it, but it sort of was over pretty quickly. This one's obviously not, and it's causing the market to fret.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So we've got bear market confirmed for the S&P 500. Anyone who's been in crypto for 5 minutes is like surely accustomed to this level of volatility. In fact, it's barely a blip, really.
Yeah,
I think we've seen bigger dips in the last 12 months.
Yeah, during the bull market.
My advisor and reached out to me and it's kind of like, look at my TradFi portfolio. He's like, how are you concerned about this thing? I'm like, there's volatility. What? This is welcome to every week in crypto.
It's like that classic meme where the guy's like got the noose around his neck, he's looking at the other guy and going, first time.
I was like, no, I'm not stressed.
You call this a bear market?
Yeah, it's barely a bear market. Yeah, this is the bear market.
No, but I mean, for those guys, it's a big deal.
Oh,
like they're not used to it.
Come see me when we're 50% down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, this is like water off a duck's back for us, but that's a big deal for them. I mean, like the Aussie market was down 5 or 6%, and then boom, this morning it's up again like 4% or something. So everything's bouncing around everywhere. No one knows what to think.
Yeah.
It's
just another day.
Just
so what does this all mean? We've talked a lot about the macro stuff. Let's get into the actual crypto specifics. What does this kind of mean for crypto? What are we seeing? What's the good? What's the bad? And what do we think the ultimate kind of outcome for this kind of current predicament is for crypto?
For me, this is like really reinforcing something we said last week as well. Bitcoin is definitely so stable relatively. Like if you look at the price now, I think we're at about 80k or 81k, something like that. That's where we were sort of a week ago. Or, it's not that. I mean, it's lower than we'd all want it to be, obviously, but it's doing pretty well. And then you look at it, like the whole array of alts, and everything's down 10-20% easy. So yeah, for me, for crypto, I don't know. It's an opportunity to let Bitcoin shine is how I like to view it, and so far it's not doing too badly. We're back above 80k. That was kind of a pretty key number for a lot of people. I know if you sort of look at the technical analysis, I think around 73k is a area of support. I guess that's kind of where the 2021's all-time high was. So it's a big location from the technical side. And if we go too far below that for too long, then things are looking pretty dire. But we bounced off yesterday. I think like mid 74Ks. We're now above 80K. Things are looking okay. I'm not too worried. I think there's a lot of, as everyone keeps saying, there's so many like tailwinds in this space right now. So many good things are happening. So many, so much friction is getting removed. And then you get like these macro external exogenous kind of forces coming and pushing the entire market down. You can't sort of take it personally.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
I won't mention who. You know who you are, looking at the camera. Staff member of Independent Reserve said if Bitcoin hits 75,000, I'm going with 5x leverage. But when push came to shove, they didn't do it. You know who you are. Anyway, it was the time, as it turns out.
Yeah, well, we're like 6 hours in, right? We need to,
you could have been retired by now in that 6 hours.
Yeah, 5x long.
Maybe 500x, but still. Yeah. So talking about some of the crypto-specific stuff, Hong Kong greenlight staking.
Yeah, this is cool, and I like kind of the narrative behind this. So obviously they're not opening the floodgates. It's you come and talk to us first, and we'll discuss it with you, and if everything's cool, and you've done the right things and you've ticked all the boxes and filled in the right forms, you can potentially do staking on your ETF. But what I kind of liked about the underlying message there was that they were talking less about sort of the risk to the investors, and obviously that risk exists and they've got to be careful about it. But they mentioned about how the concept of staking secures the network that you're investing in, and so it's kind of like a win-win for everything. Like if there's more stakers, there's more validators happening on the network, it's more likely that the network's not going to just do some kind of mining death spiral or whatever the ultimate issue is. And I kind of like that idea that the regulator is saying, we can make this network better by allowing people to stake, and totally. They get to earn yield on it. It's a win-win for me.
Win-win. Okay, that's good. Big names, tip big things for Bitcoin. So right now, we've said before the crypto SAR, but
it's
Treasury Secretary Scott Besson has made some. He's come out with the gold narrative about Bitcoin.
Yeah, we spoke about this just before. This is the kind of stuff you want to hear coming out of, the number one superpower in the world kind of thing. You want to hear them talking about Bitcoin being gold, and Larry Fink, with his sort of backwards message, where you kind of read between the lines, and I consider it bullish for my portfolio at least. But yeah, this is kind of what you want. So
it's I don't know if you can call Bitcoin necessarily mainstream just yet. Certainly it's heading in that direction, and it's just becoming more and more. When you talk with Bitcoin, it just doesn't seem like a far out conversation anymore. Certainly when I speak with people outside of crypto, they're like, Bitcoin's a totally regular thing these days. It's more and more people that you're surprised to have just own it. It just feels like it's definitely, if it's not already there, definitely on the precipice of becoming completely mainstream adoption. The career risk about having Bitcoin in your portfolio seems to be almost done. In fact, there's a lot of people actively trying to work out situations to get more Bitcoin in the portfolio, because everyone's kind of seeing it as this thing, it's here to stay. And now, realistically, your portfolio is not diversified if you don't have this asset in it. I guess the growing institutional adoption, what are we seeing on that front? Are we seeing more? Where are we actually seeing the real traction take place?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about Bitcoin specifically, I think it's still, I feel like there's going to be phases in this whole thing. So last year in the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF, the spot ETF specifically, was, given the green light, there was, this massive, like that kind of started that bull run, or started at least massive price accumulation. A lot of people were getting involved. There was awesome stats out about how it had taken in, more than the gold ETF, more than this, more than that, and it was really bullish kind of stats on that whole process. I feel like the institutions that really wanted to allocate to Bitcoin but just had no way to do it, did it, and that was kind of the first wave. And we've gone through that, and now the ETFs are sort of, some days you'll get inflows, some days you'll get outflows. It's kind of acting like a bit more
like a regular
normal.
ETF.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not just getting this huge influx, but there's still so many institutions out there that are still figuring out how they do it, and they're looking at what the first wave did, and we're like, oh, they're not dead yet, and actually they're doing pretty well. And I think like the second wave will come. It's difficult to be the second wave when all of this other macro stuff is happening because everyone doesn't know what's going on. So you don't want to be allocating to anything that you think is risky. It's just all risk assets are feeling the same kind of pain.
Yep.
But it'll come. It'll come.
Yeah, definitely.
The second wave will be here, and we'll see all the inflows start all over again, and Ethereum will finally go up a little bit.
We'll get to see a pump in Ethereum again, maybe this decade. Larry Fink's endorsement, I think we touched on that. DeFi comeback postponed. That's no good for the...
That's really sad.
Why is it being postponed, Nick?
Well, I just had to make a decision, so I decided to postpone it. DeFi is sort of... That was really... I don't know, I felt a bit awkward about that one. So there's a lot of chat around DeFi making a comeback, and everyone was kind of pinning their hopes on AI. So I've seen a lot of DeFi, and it's easier read than said. It's DEFAI. So you got DeFi and AI. Sorry, I probably explained that a little bit too much. So there's a lot of...
How do you spell AI?
Yeah. Well, AI stands for artificial intelligence. I'll get the AI to spell it for you. Yeah, there's a lot of chat around getting DeFi making a comeback because of this new narrative that could like kickstart the whole DeFi thing again. And I think DeFi is not going anywhere. There's a lot of stuff that's very useful in DeFi. There's a lot of crap that just wasn't useful at all, that inflated a lot of market caps that shouldn't have been inflated. People were kind of hoping that this thing would come back. To me, it seemed a lot like copium, like people had heavy DeFi bags. And
People like to latch on a narrative.
Trying to pump it just so they can get out. And maybe they all did get out, and that's why the comeback never happened, because there's just sustained selling pressure. It's interesting. MakerDAO is the only one who seemed to do anything good.
I think MakerDAO is going to change their name, aren't they?
They have, yeah.
Sky Money?
Sky, the token's now Sky, I think, and the DAI is now USDS or something. USDS maybe. So they've changed sort of the way the protocol works as well. So it's obviously doing pretty well. A lot of buybacks happening, tokens appreciating in price.
MakerDAO has always had a bit of a crossover, and I think this is always going to be the killer, like the use case, is the DeFi protocol in and of its own was probably kind of conceptual and kind of cool from almost like a hypothetical standpoint, but like at least with MakerDAO, they always from day one had very much a crossover between sort of the protocol and real world assets. Like in a lot of ways, there was always
they were sort of emulating a traditional finance framework. And it's like they're one of the OGs, right? They've been around forever. And not without their issues, not without the problems along the way, as do any of these kind of protocols that have like a figurehead person who leads the way and sometimes doesn't make the decisions that everyone else would want them to. But I think it's doing really well.
Yeah, good news. All right, so this week, I guess some scenarios. We've got some. The macro backdrop is undoubtedly the tariff stuff. It's affecting everything right now. As we mentioned, we can't really tariff crypto, but there's still plenty happening in crypto. And as far as dips go, it's not even probably the best we've seen this year.
Is that all you got?
This is a dip for ants.
Yeah. I don't know, mate. Where were you yesterday? That was painful to watch. I was crying.
That's not because of the dip, but it's probably because of my bullying. But the best case, what about some best case, worst case? What do we see out of this? What's the fork in the road here?
No, that's a good question. And this is something we've seen asked over the last sort of 24 hours. Is the bottom in? Is the bottom in? Is the bottom in? No one's got a crystal ball, but everyone wants to know: is it time to buy? We've had a bit of opportunistic buying on the desk, so if that gives any kind of sentiment. If you look at sort of the retail market, the wider retail market, sentiment is through the floor, right? It's we're in bear market times kind of thing. But I'd say on the OTC desk, the flows are more balanced. You know, it's always easy to paint retail as being the uninformed, you know, but often like the general sentiment is not necessarily untrue. Yeah, I don't know. I would hope the bottom's in. Like as we talked about before, like technical analysis would suggest that 73K is kind of, you don't want to go too far below that, and we sort of bounced off that yesterday. I know you were like, you know, shooting the guns in the air, and we've made it, baby, 5x long and I'm retiring. I'm not sure we're not going to necessarily bounce back along that 74 and test it a couple more times.
Sorry,
We'll
to unnamed parties.
Right,
you haven't missed retirement and financial freedom just yet.
There's possibly more opportunities for them to start their 5x long. Yeah, but who knows? Who knows? Like everything is just an unknown with the tariff, trade war, Trump. You'd be a fool to try and predict what's going to happen next. I mean, I definitely like looking logically at everything. I would hope that this is the bottom, and we've still got another 6 months bull market to go. But man, anything could happen.
Anything could happen. Yeah. It's kind of certainly on the sales side of things. I feel like we get not necessarily a forward indicator, but generally there's a good vibe check of what's going on. And I can tell you after sort of Terra Luna happened in 2022, like when sentiment was like it was beyond low, it was crushed, right? And any interest in the sector that came from the outside the really, what's the word? The not dyed in the wool, but like the hardcore crypto scene, right? Yeah. Anyone who was in crypto, who worked in crypto, who kind of had their like livelihood attached to the survival of the industry, had disappeared. Yeah. Right. Fast forward to 2025, and we're seeing the market mood is definitely depressed, but we're not seeing this. We're still seeing activity. We're still seeing a lot of interest from not just the crypto crowd who are still continually building their businesses, but from outside of crypto, the crypto adjacent, if you want to call it that, retail and whatnot, looking to capitalize on this dip so far as a buying opportunity, as opposed to it's dead, we need to pack up and wait for the end of the winter. Yeah,
I agree. We're seeing a similar thing. Like obviously you guys are feeding the clients to us, but it's definitely been more buying than selling for that stuff. Now there's a lot of off-ramping that happens in other areas that, definitely makes up for it. But it's been kind of heartening to see. I know we had like a couple of clients buying some big Bitcoin numbers at the last dip. So I'm talking, a few weeks ago, I think it got down to high 70s. Saw some people come in, do some big buying there, and I was like, oh, okay, there's clearly a feeling that this is it. But then they sold out sort of mid 80s. I'm like, okay, there obviously wasn't a lot.
The conviction
wasn't there. But with hindsight, again, that was the right move, because if they come back now, they're gonna this sort of big number, longer term swing trading would pay off for these guys. I mean, maybe I need to start copy trading. Obviously, I wouldn't do that. It's you're right. You get a lot of sentiment from sort of just watching how people act, and there's also the classic indicator, the Google search term sort of results. You see how many people are actually interested in the asset, and it can be a forward indicator sometimes.
How many Googles are we getting?
Tens of thousands per week.
Yeah. So I feel like anyway that's still relatively positive news, but again. A proper correction again from here, and maybe that sort of optimism that it's just a buying opportunity will disappear. But still, certainly as far as I can tell, and I'm not just trying to paint a rosier picture, but it still feels pretty positive, and we're still seeing a lot of activity. I think one of the biggest things, and you probably see this on the desk more than I do, is the number of businesses and number of crypto-related businesses that we talk to that are busier now than ever. We just did the podcast with guys like Hashlock, great Australian success story. They do security audits on smart contracts. And so Web3 businesses are predominantly, I guess, anyone developing smart contracts, they're there to audit them. And that business didn't really exist 2 years ago.
Yeah, right.
And now you go to a conference anywhere around the world. I think I asked this question of Jock and Fletcher, sort of saying like, we go to a crypto conference now, it is predominantly, I guess, stocked by like Web3 businesses or AI businesses or someone who's building smart contracts to figure something, right? And all those businesses still rely on crypto for their BAU strategy. It's not the case, it's just people going, hey, I need to trade in and out of Bitcoin to kind of make some quick bucks. Businesses that have raised money and are sort of committed to the long-term development of the ecosystem and businesses that will, generate more, fees on chain for various chains. Which is something, that comes online really quickly. As I said, it's been happening for a lot longer than 18 months. I certainly have noticed it more over the last 18 months as more and more money has been poured into the development of those things. And there's certainly a time gap between when the money is poured into those projects versus when they kind of either fail or ultimately catch fire and continue to generate revenues. So again, this seems to be very much a case of watch your space. The narratives can change pretty quickly, as we know.
No, I mean, that kind of stuff, though, it's hard to change that kind of narrative, right? Like building a business, it's hard, you don't just sort of change the direction.
Doesn't turn on or off.
It's not just like a token price that can just go straight to zero. There's momentum there. There's obviously people interested, and there's, that's good news.
So that is the good news. Alrighty. So how are we going for time, Jared? We've still got a few minutes.
3 or 4.
3-4 minutes. All right.
Wow, power through it. There's actually another topic on here that we removed. It was talking about the Bitcoin hash power that it got to all-time highs.
Yeah, this is fascinating because talking about security budgets for chains, like Bitcoin, we've talked about this a lot, but like the ETFs, for example, if you're holding money in an ETF, you're just holding it in your treasury, you're not using it to transact.
Yeah.
So the Bitcoin network needs a combination of block reward from both, the Bitcoin reward and the transaction fees.
Yeah.
And we're seeing blocks come through kind of empty at the moment.
Which makes sense, right? Because if the hash power just keeps going up and up, then blocks will get mined faster until the difficulty adjustment kicks in. But it was interesting. So there's 2 issues that I have with this, and I'm glad it wasn't here. It shows that someone has read my notes on the report, because I told them to take it out. There's 2 issues with it. One, it hasn't actually reached. So the claim is that it's reached 1 zeta hash, which is 1/10 to the power of a 6 tillionth or something like that. Some huge number, right? It's like 1,000 exahashes or something. They kept spelling it ZETA. There's 2 T's in this word. Anyway,
I could see a bugbear.
Yeah, it was getting me every time. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And it wasn't just one place. It was like, I don't know if they're all copying off each other, but we're spelling it incorrectly. And secondly, the people who posted this thing initially used the wrong kind of metric to measure it. So really, it hasn't actually. There's no way to measure. And it's like a little bit of let's do sort of a deep dive into Bitcoin mining power. There's no real way to measure it because you don't know what computers are out there mining Bitcoin. It's impossible to know. The only way you can kind of know is by going, okay, how on average fast are these blocks getting mined? And you know that like if they're exactly at 10 minutes, then there must be this amount of sort of power going through, knowing the capabilities of the mining machines.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so what someone's done is they've kind of looked at this spike and gone, oh, this has now hit 1 zeta hash per second. And meanwhile, it's kind of come down again, and it sort of does this. And sure, it trends higher as more things happen, but you can't really take the top of a peak, or the bottom of the trough. Like you kind of have to average it out. And so if you look at it over like a 7-day average, we're at 900 and something, like almost there, getting pretty close. But we're not. I don't think you can in confidence say that we've hit a zeta hash.
I mean, you've seen, I guess, the hash price or whatever. A lot of these. The sort of wireless metrics you kind of using, they've been. I mean, Bitcoin miners have been slammed. But seems to be more computing power is coming online. I mean, the theory would be that like these things would switch off if it wasn't profitable. So it still seems to be roughly profitable at 1 zeta hash.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. People talk about price following hash power or hash power following price. What is it? Logically, it makes sense for hash power to follow price because the price goes up. People go, oh, I can be profitable now, and they turn the machines on. It seems to sort of vaguely happen the other way around for some reason a lot of the time. Does this increase up to over 900 exahashes per second mean we're about to prompt the price, or are there just about a bunch of mining outfits about to go broke? I don't know, because it's got to be such a difficult market at the moment. As you say, blocks aren't full. We've been mining sort of half-empty blocks for a little while now.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll have to wait.
Fantastic. All right, I think we're about done. So next week, Nick, we'll be back hopefully with better news.
Yeah. Yeah, well, your 5X, well, maybe you won't be here. Yeah, the 5X will have retired you, and I'll be doing this on my own.
Okay, that'll be interesting to watch. All right, see you next week. Thank you.
Peace out, homies.
Lee and Nick with the moonshot flow. Dispatch live, let the market glow. Crypto vibes where the numbers show. To the moon we go, let the podcast blow. Digital coins, we dissect them quick. Blazing insights, Lee and Nick. Price prediction sharper than a sword. Macro games, we break the board. The moonshot, dispatch, hear it